Good afternoon. My name is Kyle Jackson. I'm the Vice President of State Political Affairs here at the Georgia Chamber. I want to thank you for being with us this afternoon for the fifth in our 7-series webinar, today focusing on the airport at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. I want to thank our partners at the Georgia Transportation Alliance and our special guest speaker today, Miguel Southwell, the Aviation General Manager at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Miguel was named Aviation General Manager of Hartsfield-Jackson in May of 2014. He has more than 2 decades of aviation management experience. At Hartsfield-Jackson, Mr. Southwell managed the conclusion of the airport's food and beverage concessions expansion, one of the largest expansion projects in the global airport industry. He is also leading the ATL team in executing a forward-thinking master plan that will chart the course of airport development for the next 20 years. Miguel, thanks so much for being with us today, and the presentation is yours.
My pleasure. Good afternoon to everyone. It's really great to be here this afternoon, and today what I'm going to do is to talk about our priorities, which is the first item on our agenda. And let me just change the slide very quickly. And then I'll update you on some key initiatives, and then I'll take your questions. You know, quite often people ask when I run into, well, what is your top priority at the airport? And of course, in an organization that is as complex as running an airport, you simply can't have just one priority. Instead, you have a list of priorities, and I'll discuss eight key priorities with you this afternoon. This year we expect to break a record of being not just the world's busiest airport, but the world's first airport to break the 100 million passenger barrier. We had anticipated next year, but because of some very aggressive growth that we're seeing this year, we will get to the 100 million passenger mark. We are the world's most efficient airport as well. There's an organization called the Air Transportation Research Institute, which looks at the 250 largest airports in the world and rate them based upon the efficiency, the number of flights they process, passengers they process, and the related costs associated with the operation. They also look at other matrices, so the number of employees hired or needed per passenger and things like that. And for the last 12 years, Atlanta has been rated not only the world's busiest passenger airport, but also the world's most efficient airport. We'll discuss the 8 priorities today, and the first of them is cargo development. I'll just run through them very quickly. The first is cargo development. The second, I'll talk about the master plan. I'll talk about our lease negotiations. Then I'll talk about our world's busiest status and what we're doing to maintain that status. We want to talk about enhancing the guest experience. And of course, you can't do all of that without having the right people in the right position. So we just went through a restructuring. I'll talk just briefly about that. You can't do all of those things, including developing a new master plan, which is about a $7 billion program, without talking about how you build revenue. We have an operating budget of about $500 million, and we have a burn rate of about $400 million to $500 million a year that we have in construction. So the combined operating budget and the capital construction budget is about $1 billion a year. So people tend to think that we are a cash cow, and we certainly generate a lot of revenues. But at the end of the day, we always have a greater need for revenue, especially as it relates to renewing the complex and building new facilities. We always have a greater need than we have supply of cash. And lastly, we have a kind of unique situation here with this airport in that even though the city of Atlanta owns and operates the airport actually lies in several jurisdictions, and I'll talk about that. So let me start with cargo development. When I first, before I actually got here, the mayor talked about that one of the key initiatives that he has is to build Atlanta's cargo status. Even though we're number 1 in passenger service, I think we're number 11 nationally in terms of cargo tonnage, and worldwide we're probably about 35th ranked 35th or 37th worldwide in terms of cargo tonnage. And so you might ask, well, why is cargo that important? If you view the airport as simply some place where planes pull up and park and passengers get on and off and things like that, you're missing the point. The main purpose of any airport in any community is to serve as that community's main source for economic development. It's the main tool for that community's use for the economic development of that community. And if you want to break it down even more, at the very basic level, an airport is a community's main tool for the creation of jobs, whether it's from the nationally or from foreign direct investment, and to grow the wealth of people in that community. And that's what an airport is all about. And it makes it a lot more fun running an airport, getting up every day, trying to figure out how you can use this tool to drive more jobs. And and this is where the mayor's direction came from. He says, listen, you know, we have I understand 63,000 people working at the airport. It's a small campus, but we have about 63,000 employees. And so I get out there during the day and I see all these people working, and it feels like I'm doing my job as the mayor. This is what I'm supposed to do more than anything else, ensure the well-being of our people, creating jobs for them and so forth. But I get out to the airport at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and then, you know, the jobs engine seems to have stalled between then and, say, 5 a.m. in the morning. And what I've been doing is talking to people, and what they tell me that what makes the jobs engine continue running at night is cargo, because cargo moves at night. And so one of your primary jobs running that airport is to build a cargo business so that the jobs engine can run 24 hours a day. I mean, the first time I had a conversation with him, and he said that, I said, this guy gets it. This mayor is gonna be a great mayor. He gets it. And so we've been, if you look at the cargo trend in the last several years, you will see that last year, 2014, we finally rebounding after 5 years of steady decline. Now, shipping cargo on an airplane is really costly. The only time you want to put cargo on a plane, because of the high costs of shipping air cargo, is one of two reasons. Either the cargo is perishable, such as cut flowers, fruits, vegetables, pharmaceutical items, frozen fish, and meats, things like that, or that it's dry cargo, meaning it's not frozen, but it's a dry cargo that has a very high value and therefore a high potential for theft. So you want to fly it there as quickly as possible, such as gold and jewelry, such as technological items, of whether it's medical equipment or electronics. Electronics is a major thing that gets shipped on airplanes. So why have we had this 5 years of spiraling cargo, spiraling downwards, that is? First of all, we faced the global recession in the last 5 years. And the fact of the matter is, some may say it's still sputtering, but we're finally seeing a rebound. And that affects primarily the dry cargo business. The other thing is that technology has not been helping us either. That is, if you think of all those electronic goods that are being shipped, and you think of a television, a 32-inch television 10, 12, 15 years ago was this heavy, bulbous item that took at least 2 people to lift it, if not 3. Today, and over the last several years, you think of what's been happening with that technology, where you have a 32-inch television, most of them now are flat screen, all of them are flat screen televisions that can easily be lifted generally by one person. And so the technology, while we had the number of items have increased in terms of actual number of electronic items, the actual weight of those items, whether it's telephones or televisions, have been plummeting. And so the only growth area for the last 5 years in the cargo industry has been really the perishable sector. And so in the last 5 years, on average, the perishable business has averaged a growth of 4.5%. I think last year it grew over 6%. People are shipping more flowers, more frozen fish, a lot of flowers coming out of Colombia, frozen fish coming out of Chile, a lot of it coming through. About 85%, I believe, of the cut flowers sold in this country is now being imported. The problem has been that about 80–85% of all of those perishable items that come into the country come in through Miami International Airport. There are a couple of reasons for that. Build an infrastructure that can accommodate perishable goods. More specifically, the key thing about shipping perishable goods is maintaining what you call the cold chain, so that the commodity or item never is in an area where it is not in a cold environment. So in Miami, when a large jumbo jet arrives filled with cut flowers, the cut flowers then go to a chilled environment into a refrigerated warehouse for the cargo airline or the cargo company. Once the flowers are broken down from bulk into smaller packages, they are then customs and are invited to the refrigerated warehouse to inspect the goods. And once that inspection is over, still again in the refrigerated warehouse, all of it then moves onto a refrigerated truck, and that truck, 85% of those trucks drive right past Atlanta every Friday on their way to the Northeast, the New York, Connecticut area, to be sold. If during the inspection process USDA finds a bug, it means that the flowers have to be fumigated, and if they have to be fumigated, and this goes for things like asparagus as well, which comes in huge volumes, just tremendous volumes during the summertime. The goods then still get put into a refrigerated truck, but rather than hitting the road, those trucks then go to a fumigation facility, which for those of you who are old enough and who have visited a drive-in cinema, resembles a drive-in cinema. And but instead of having the poles where you have the speakers on top of the poles when you pull up and you put the speaker into your car, instead, in a fumigation facility, you do have the poles, but you have these rubber plastic hoses at the top of the pole. You unravel the hoses and you stick them into the back of the truck, and you pump the truck full of methyl bromide for about 2 hours, killing the pests. And then after you have killed the pest, then the truck proceeds onto the road to like I said, 85% of it to the Northeast area. Now, that's what happens in Miami. What happens in Atlanta is that the cut flowers arrive, and we get very little of it, and it goes to a refrigerated. When it's time for inspection, the USDA facility is on the other side of the airfield, and the cut flowers have to be hauled across the airfield, whether it's cold or hot or whatever, but at that time it's broken the cold chain for USDA to inspect. And then, once the inspection's done, they haul it back across the airfield to the refrigerated warehouse, and then they put it in a refrigerated truck after that point to go to New York. God forbid they find a bug, because if they find a bug, then it has to be fumigated. And we have a small, tiny fumigation chamber, which is really not conducive to fumigate large portions, large shipments. So which means that you would have to take the flowers and tent it. Just as you fumigate a house, you put a tent over the house. Similarly, you would put a tent of some type over the flowers, and you fumigate the flowers. And let's hope there's not a traffic jam on I-75, because our fumigation guy lives in Macon, Georgia. So he has to make the trip up 75 to Atlanta to get all of that done. So clearly, we don't have enough, not only do we not have the proper facilities here to compete with Miami, but we also don't have enough cargo warehouses. In the cargo industry, we have a saying that for every 1 annual ton of cargo, we need 1 square foot of warehouse space. If you look at that chart in 2014, we have 601,000 metric tons of freight. We have about 550 square feet of warehouse space. So we're already behind the 8 ball, and a basic necessity such as a warehouse, we have to catch up and build more warehouses, and we're in the process of doing that. So what we're hoping to do, our goal is over the next 5 years to triple the air cargo that we have here at the airport. And that means we have to triple the amount of warehouse spaces. So we want to get to 1.7 million metric tons of freight in the next 5 years. We're currently, again, at about 600,000. 1.5 million metric tons of freight, 1.7 million metric tons will move us from number 11 to number 5 in the country. And right now, I think LAX, Los Angeles Airport, is number 5. We've started that process of building new warehouses. We will have a new cargo warehouse completed next summer, which will add another 100,000 square feet of cargo space. And we're designing additional warehouses right now for a total of about $217 million worth of construction over the next 5 years or so. How are we doing? We've started new service to key and very strategic locations. When one thinks that the fastest economic regions of the world are basically in Asia and certain parts in Latin America, even though Brazil has slowed somewhat, and Turkey and Russia, we all talk about the fastest regions of the world being the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and recently they have added South Africa, so it's now BRICS, and they've added Indonesia, which still makes it BRICS. But if you look at these where we've commenced cargo service, you can see that we're really hitting the mark. Emirates Air Cargo started flying here in 2014, which is a key Middle Eastern destination. China Air Cargo, of course, and I particularly love Turkish because Turkey really has just been booming economically and continues its tradition of the point of joining the East and the Eastern and Western Hemisphere. And of course, we started service in October to Russia as well. Eastern Europe is also a burgeoning area, and of course, we will be starting service this month by Cal of Belgium. Perhaps even more exciting, especially as it relates to foreign direct investment, is that Turkish Airlines will also begin service next year, May, passenger service from Turkey to Atlanta. Again, with the Turkish service, you'll be able to make really easy and convenient connections to India and parts Qatar, or some people may say Qatar, which is really a 6-star airline, will begin service in June of next year, June 2016 as well. So it's not just that we're getting results, but we're getting results from really key economic development areas, because that's really that's how the airport really a key area in how the airport functions as an economic driver in terms of jobs. Cargo is exciting because cargo, you can make good money in cargo without even having a high school degree. And there's a segment of our population that's in desperate need of these types of jobs. You can drive a forklift and make really good money in the cargo business. On the other hand, companies, major corporations in these fast-growing economies, in China, in India, in Turkey, in the Middle East, will not, in considering, all of them want to expand into the U.S. market. They want to have access to the U.S. market, which means that they're looking to set up U.S. offices and U.S. headquarters. And among the top two criteria, if you talk to the location experts, among the top two criteria that these corporate location experts look at is to ensure that there's a non-stop, not just direct, a non-stop flight from their corporate headquarters in their foreign country to whatever U.S. city they choose as their corporate headquarters. Rather than talking about this later, I want to make this point here. The state of Georgia has 1,500 German companies. 1,500 German companies. We wouldn't have had a fraction of that had there been non-stop service every day from Atlanta to points in Germany by both Atlanta's and Georgia's national carrier Delta, as well as the German carrier Lufthansa. You would never have had not 1/4 or 1/10 of those 1,500 companies. It didn't matter how hard the economic development community works. If you don't have non-stop service, those companies looking for foreign direct investment in the United States and to set up their offices will most look to those communities where they can move their people and goods non-stop. That's why you have Porsche North America, Delta's Germany's flagship luxury brand, having its North American headquarters set up here in Atlanta. That is why Mercedes-Benz just announced its North American corporate headquarters in Sandy Springs. Those two corporate locations owe their presence here in Atlanta and the state of Georgia because of the presence of direct service and hence the airport. So now I'd like to go on to discuss the master plan. Just quickly, the Federal Aviation Administration, I should pause here. Are there any questions?
Yeah, and for folks on the webinar today, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat or the question feature to send them in electronically, and we'll make sure that they get relayed to Miguel.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll go on to the master plan. The Federal Aviation Administration requires that you, at least a 20-year master plan, that simply looks at your projection or forecast of whether it's planes landing, passengers using the terminal ways, cars using the parking decks, and therefore put together a plan of construction of what facilities need to be built or expanded. We have just completed a master plan, a capital program, where we spent over $5 billion that produced a new runway, a new International Concourse F. But of course, as soon as we're now completing that, we're in the process of the first quarter of next year starting the next capital program that will flow from this new master plan. This new master plan is, it shows 15 years, but on a related item that I'm going to discuss in a moment, we're negotiating with our airlines to complete a new agreement, and that 15-year program is likely to be a 20-year program. But today what I'm showing you is it was the original goal of a $7.4 billion master plan, which is essentially a construction program, I'm sorry, a construction program over a 15-year period. This is a draft. I believe it'll be more like a $6.4 billion program over a 20-year program, period of time. But the key elements of that program is the central passenger terminal complex, and there are several things that we're going to do with that. The existing domestic terminal at the airport has been in place for about 32, 33 years, which means it was designed probably 37 years ago. And we know a lot more today than we did 37, 40 years ago about the passenger and the traveler psychology. We know, for example, that it doesn't matter how much of a road warrior you are in terms of traveling, that traveling is inherently an anxious experience, especially if you have to go through, when you have to go through security checkpoints with all the screening. It's just an inherently anxious experience. And we know that one of the ways we can help reduce that anxiety is to let more light into the building. So you're going to be seeing some of the hard walls removed. We do have some concourses with no windows at all. And so you're going to be seeing a lot of those hard structures removed and replaced by glass. You're going to be seeing raised ceilings, brighter lighting, again, to make the area more airy and brighter. Of course, today's concourses necessarily must have the ability for you to sit and wait for the plane, charge your phones, internet connection without leaving your seat. So all of those things will be incorporated into the new terminal modernization program. We're also going to be expanding a few terminals as well, and we're now talking about a Concourse G to the north, expanding just as a layout. When this airport was built over 30 years ago, because of the extremely efficient design, where you have the complex where the planes pull up to the concourses to pick up and drop off passengers, and on either side of that complex you have runways to the north and runways to the south. This particular design is called the midfield complex, and every major airport that's been built ever since has actually adopted this particular model. It's one of the reasons why the airport is so efficient. So we will continue the eastward construction of the concourses. We're going to be replacing the existing parking decks, which represents an essential thing for us. Parking is our biggest revenue generator at the airport, about $120 million a year. And the existing short-term parking decks, unfortunately, don't have the load-bearing capacity for us to go any higher. So we're going to have to demolish them and replace them. This is essential because we have some 33,000 parking spaces on the airport. However, off-airport, private contractors have about 20,000 parking spaces compared to our 33,000 that's on airport. And they own, and that those 20,000 off-airport parking spaces that are being built by private entities continue to grow. There are 2 additional ones under construction as we speak. And the only reason this is occurring is because we at the airport are not meeting the parking demand. So we're working to make sure that those parking garages get done. We talked about cargo development. On the air side and land side areas, we're also talking about a 6th runway. The 6th runway is probably about 14 to 15 years out into the future. The reason we need a 6th runway, we currently have 5 runways. During about 20% of the time here in Atlanta, we have inclement weather, where the pilots are flying severely impaired in terms of vision or flying blind. And during that time, we have 3 simultaneous landings at the same time because we currently have 5 runways. We use 3 of them for the planes landing to get the planes out of the sky as quickly as possible, because Atlanta is very key to the national airspace system, and any delays in Atlanta ripple across the country. When you have that kind of weather, you have to space the planes further apart, and so we use 3 of the runways for landings. We anticipate that in about 14 to 15 years that we will need to have 4 simultaneous landings, and that will give rise to having to add a 6th runway. So we're working on that as well. Lastly, we'll have to construct something called an end-around taxiway. If you look to the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see a layout of the airport, and you will see at the bottom of that layout is a kind of gray shaded runway that currently exists with a blue, a superimposed blue runway right next, just north of it. Well, to make it short, when a plane lands over there, down on that side of the airport, and tries to then traverse itself all the way across to the concourse to actually permit you to get off the plane, you'll see where they have to literally traverse across 2 active runways to get to the concourse to let you off. And so what an end-around taxiway is, it goes around the active runways, so planes won't have to cross those 2 runways, active runways, to get to the concourse to drop you off. And so that's the last of the master plan items that I want to talk about. I want to give you just a glimpse of the terminal modernization. One of the things you're going to see here at the airport is you're looking at a photo in the right-hand section, which is a transparent glass structure. Today, when you leave the terminal, if you're an Atlanta arriving passenger and you have a relative picking you up, you stand on a curb that's pretty much slightly shaded, or if you have a car that's parked in the parking garages, when you walk from the main terminal parking garages, you're exposed to the elements, and if it's raining, you're sure to get wet. And so if you see Denver and some of the newer airports, they have this canopy that flows from the parking decks to the terminal, so that should it be raining, you can avoid the elements. So we'll be doing that on both sides of the airport, and that will probably be the most visible sign of the modernization of the airport. Those gray blobs that you're looking at are the new parking infrastructure garages. Let me see, like here, that looks just like it. Those are the new parking garages at a cost of about $1 billion. We'll go to the next slide. That's the end-around taxiway. We anticipate that that's going to cost about $1.8 billion. I want to talk to you very quickly about this concept. It's called an airport city concept. And the airport city concept is fairly new for the United States. What airports historically have not been able to attract high-end development around the airport. More specifically, while the presence of the airport has played a key role in attracting foreign direct investment and national headquarters here in Atlanta and the state of Georgia, most of that investment goes to downtown Atlanta, midtown Atlanta, Buckhead, Alpharetta, etc. The area around the airport, however, has remained blighted and has only attracted really 2 hotels, 2.5-star hotels, warehouses, 6 centers, and so forth. And this is true throughout the United States because we as Americans have a strong aversion to airport noise and aircraft noise. Not so in other developing countries around the world, in Europe or, other advanced economies such as those in Europe or developing and emerging economies around the world. If you go to Latin America, for example, when the plane is landing and you look through the window, you'll see all these high-end homes or high facilities that are built close to the airport. If you go to Amsterdam, Schiphol, which is one of the world's leading airports, when you exit the airport and you're at the curb at the airport, you look across the street, you see 5-star hotels, you see Class A office buildings right there at the airport. The same thing in Frankfurt, Germany. Well, the mayor has started by saying, you know, every world-class airport should have a world-class hotel. And so we started with this notion that we needed to build a hotel. And then Porsche North America, having established its headquarters next to the airport, teamed up with the Atlanta Regional Commission, which is Georgia's planning agency. And they said, you know, we should look at the southern crescent around the airport and try to view it the way they do in Europe as a major opportunity to develop for major development, high-end development, Class A office complexes, 5-star hotels. We have coined these 2 efforts that's being made by the Atlanta Regional Commission, the folks at Porsche, and all of the municipalities around the airport, College Park, Riverdale, all these cities, all of these elected officials have gotten together and started this effort called the Atlanta Aerotropolis Alliance, and to pursue this goal. So we thought we'll kick this off. We recently issued a request for proposal to invite companies to develop the front of the airport, starting with a four-star hotel, which is what you're seeing represented here. For those of you who are familiar with the airport, this is the west end of the airport where the taxis normally come up right along here. This is the car rental train that takes you to the car rental facility. This is Interstate 85. This is south running north on Interstate 85. Of course, when you're taking a flight, you'll come into the airport on this side and come around here and come into the airport. Now, what we're proposing to build is a four-star hotel. So the taxi cabs pull up here. We're proposing to build a four-star hotel here. Coming into the airport right off 85, we're hoping to have a travel plaza that will have a service station as its anchor, so that if you rent a car and you have to return it to the car rental company, it's not filled with gas, you don't have to pay $8 a gallon. You'll also have a retail facility, a small retail facility with the service station. But in between the travel plaza and the hotel, the four-star hotel, which should be about a 400-room hotel, you have these 13 acres of land in here that could accommodate approximately 2 million square feet of mixed-use development, which could be additional hotels, retail, and we're not even excluding some residential. And so we had 6 companies propose on the project. We shortlisted 3 companies, one of which dropped out, and we received 2 proposals from the last 2 companies. And so we're looking forward to complete that process. The company will, of course, not only develop the hotel, but they will propose to us what they plan to do with these 13 acres, and they will also be doing the service station and the travel plaza as well. These are other depictions of that development. This would be the four-star hotel, and this is not exactly how they necessarily will look. The hotel will necessarily look, but we wanted to give the prospective developers the high level of development that we were seeking. And so these are just conceptual drawings. The other one as well, and this is another angle. This is also another one coming up, another, and another. Okay. To the lease negotiations, I won't spend a lot of time with this, but every airport has a central agreement under which codifies the relationship between the airport, or in this case the city of Atlanta, which owns and operates the airport, and all the airlines that serve the airport. It talks about how rates and charges are calculated, how rents are calculated. It talks about an agreement on a capital program going forward, what's going to be built, and generally when, how it's going to be financed, who's going to be paying for what the airline's going to be paying for, what the city's going to be paying for. And so it primarily there are normally 4 parts of it in the negotiation. One is something called a gate utilization, that is who's eligible to use gates, and when you're eligible to get a gate, or if it's a common use gate, etc. We develop provisions for that. An agreement on the cap, and there's one thing that's missing here, which is a key thing called normally referred to as the majority in interest provision. And all that is saying is, what does the city give airlines input on? That is, what things that the city of Atlanta does, that it will require the input of airlines. And so that has to be negotiated as well. There's some things the city has to preserve so that it can do those things to ensure safety or whatever. Then we, of course, have to talk about a capital program. And, what the airlines will have to help finance some of the construction. So we need to talk about that. And this capital improvement program piece significantly impacts what the airlines' rates and charges will be eventually. So we hope to wrap up the negotiations by the end of November. As I've said, you don't want to be the general manager of this airport and have the airport lose the ranking as the world's busiest airport. And so we're doing a number of things to make sure that that happens. As I said, we're running ahead of target. We thought it would be about 99 million passengers this year maximum, but it looks very clearly that we're going to go over the 1 passenger mark. But here's some of the things that we're doing to bolster the passenger traffic here, because there's never been a time in our history when we have a greater chance of losing that title, primarily because the second ranked airport behind us is Beijing, and Beijing is about 12 to 14 million passengers behind us. The problem is this, however: 90% of our passengers here at the airport are from the U.S. domestic market. And that 90% share, U.S. domestic passenger market, is only growing about 0.5% to 1.5% per year. Consider China, that's the second place, 14 million passengers behind us. Their domestic market, travel market, is growing about 6.5% per year compared to our 0.5% or 1.5%. If you just do the math, by 2017, Beijing would just blow past us. And so we can't permit that to happen. And so we have a new international air service incentive program. There are two areas of potential growth for us. The first one is international. We're working with the Atlanta Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Atlanta Metro Chamber of Commerce, and a number of economic development organizations to help build the international traffic. We're going to be looking at 3 or 4 niches, including medical tourism, shopping tourism, educational tourism, heritage tourism. Let me talk about shopping tourism. What am I talking about? Here's what I'm talking about. We people don't understand the level or the extent of the shopping that's done by people from other countries here in the United States. People come here every day to shop in vast quantities. The large majority of that shopping, probably 90–95% of it, takes place in Miami and New York, and some in Puerto Rico. Let me give you a sense of the amount of shopping that's being done in Miami, for example. When one comes here to spend $5 or $10 million to make purchases, clothing, shoes, hardware, such as bathroom faucets, door handles, you'll be surprised the things people buy. Flat screen televisions. When they bring $5,000 or $10,000 to shop, they want to make sure when they return to Barbados or Costa Rica or Colombia that those goods are actually on the planes when they get there with them. So they have it shrink wrapped. The company that does the shrink wrapping of those bags guarantees the airport in Miami $9.6 million a year in payments to the airport. $9.6 million a year they're paying the airport, and they still make a profit. And they have a vast labor cost that they have to support, and they still are able to pay the airport $9.6 million a year. That is how much money they generate. That is how much shopping that is done in this country. We have a vast amount of universities here in the state of Georgia. You know, if you go to anywhere in Latin America, you see the people from the University of Miami and all the various hospitals in Miami, all the various educational institutions in Miami, selling their facilities in Latin America and the Caribbean. We here in Georgia certainly have equal to, but probably superior medical facilities, superior educational facilities. We're just not selling it. We're just not telling other people about it. And so those represent some significant areas for us to work to grow those markets. So we'll be working with those. On the domestic air service side, we have a great opportunity. Even though we will have about 100 million passengers passing through the airport this year, only 1/3 of them are coming to Atlanta. The other 66 million are simply connecting from one flight to another. They will never see Atlanta. They'll never come back to Atlanta. Mayor Reed has put together a marketing task force made up of the brightest marketing minds from Atlanta's top companies have demonstrated their global marketing prowess. You might just imagine who some of those companies are. Coca-Cola, CNN, of course we have the Convention Visitors Bureau, Delta, the advertising giant BBDO, just some major companies that we didn't ask for their CEOs, we asked for their brightest marketing minds. And they're in the process of putting together this product. And here's what we want to accomplish. If you have 66 million in this building for an average of 2 hours connecting from one flight to another, we absolutely have an obligation to be doing things on the confines of this airport so that those people can see something, hear something, taste something, experience something that, if not compel them, will strongly interest them in coming back to Atlanta and the state of Georgia to visit or to start a business. The effort is going extraordinarily well. I've been in some of the meetings and the amazing things that are coming out of this marketing task force. You'll begin to see them being implemented the first quarter of next year. And so that's what we're doing to try and maintain our status as the world's busiest airport. One of the challenges we have with our customer service program is that our key ingredient to the customer service program here in Atlanta is really the people. I have colleagues from other airports who tell me this all the time. Atlantans and Georgians are just inherently hospitable people. We are friendly, we say good morning, and my colleagues at other airports, they envy us because we just naturally do this. And so the challenge is, how do you make this even better? How do you make this even better? And so our mantra is really to find out what it is that the customer wants, and then do something better to surprise them to make it better. And when I first came to the airport a couple of years ago and talked to staff about this, they said, "Oh, what do you really mean?" And what I painted for them is a few times I've stayed at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. I thought it'd be better to give them an example. And the example I give them is, I go to the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, and I'm 6'4" and they always give you this little tiny bottle of lotion anytime you visit a hotel. So anytime you stay at a hotel, they give you this lotion, and the first thing I do when I get to my room is I always ask for additional lotion. And so, because I tend to also suffer from eczema or dry skin. And so within 5 minutes, normally there's an attendant there with a big plastic bag of goodies, including 4 bottles of lotion, 5 extra bottles of shampoo, and things like that. You all can't see me, but I'm bald, so I can't do anything with the shampoo. But the thing is, they always surprise me when they do that, because it really is the epitome of exceeding your expectations. So I talked to my staff about this, and sure enough, 2 months later, I get a call. They wanted me to go where the taxis are being dispatched, and I get down there, and they have totally changed the entire area to make it look like the front of a Ritz-Carlton hotel. A red carpet, chrome stanchions, beautiful potted plants. They get it, and that is just the beginning. We're continuing to try and surprise and delight our passengers, because it's really tough to to build upon what we have. But we believe we can do that if we adopt, exceeding our passengers' expectations as our mantra. I'll just go past that. And as I said, nothing gets done without having the right people in the right positions. And so the mayor has supported us with reorganizing, our recommendation to reorganize. We've had some key positions so that we can meet all of those priorities, from growing the revenue to improving the customer service. For example, we created a new guest services director for the guest services program. And we made it a point to get someone from the hotel industry that understands the subtle difference between a customer and a guest, because we want passengers, each of our passengers, to have a guest experience. I'll go to the next one. Of course, we also hired some additional people to help us build revenues. We have a traditional sources of revenues, of course. We have a large concession program with a number of food, beverage, and retail programs, and that's really been doing very well. Sales this year will exceed over $500 million. That was a growth of some 7%. And our car rental business has really just rocketed at 11.1% this year. Some of that is because the cost of rental car vehicles has just gone up, so they've had to increase the daily rental cost, daily rental charge to customers. But still, notwithstanding that, in addition to that, we also had a banner year. We also, however, in addition to those traditional forms of airport revenues, whether it's concessions or car rental revenues, we're also looking at ways to build non-traditional revenues. We're looking to determine what other type of duty-free goods we could sell. Traditionally, duty-free has been limited generally to 4 areas: liquor, tobacco products, fragrances, and jewelry, like watches and so forth, and accessories. And so we're looking to expand, and we'll be the first airport in the United States if it's successfully done. We also have vast amounts of real estate around the airport. We own 10,000 acres of land in Dawson County, 10,000 acres of land in Paulding County, many acres of land around the airport, which we expect to expand to in the next 25, 30 years. So it doesn't make any sense that we sell that land and then have to buy it back at a premium. So we're looking to develop those areas on long-term leases so that all of those dormant, non-performing assets can be converted into revenue-producing assets. Lastly, I want to talk about government and community partnerships. I should say second to last. Atlanta is a unique airport in that even though it's owned and operated by the city of Atlanta, it is mostly regulated by the federal government, also is affected by both local and state laws, but perhaps more importantly, the airport's physical location is not in the city of Atlanta. Only a tiny piece of it sits in Atlanta, and a tiny piece of it sits in Fulton County. The large majority of it lies in Clayton County, and a large portion of it lies in College Park, as well as a piece of it also lies in Hapeville. And our noise emitted from the airport also impacts Forest Park, and depending upon the weather, parts of Riverdale, but most of the noise impacts East Point. And so we have all these various communities that we actually exist in physically, or we actually impact. So a significant amount of my time is spent dealing with those communities, making sure we're good corporate stewards of the environment and good corporate citizens, and providing a tangible benefit to them. And so we have airport tours. Many evenings we spend having community meetings in churches, talking to folks about what the airport's doing, noise impacts, and how they can support us, how we can support them, and so forth. So that's really key for us. And lastly, I want to talk about this subject matter because some of you may have seen that last December, an enterprising employee at Delta Airlines had smuggled guns to New York from Atlanta. A debate started after that because what happened was the rest of America, watching CNN and CBS and all the other programs, news programs, learned that of the 452 commercial airports in the United States, 452, that only 2 of them screen employees. So we have 63,000 employees, and about 40,000 of them have to go to the secure area every day. And so up until earlier this year, all of those employees would board a bus somewhere and then drive right onto the airport through a fence without any screening, like the other 450 airports in the country. And so, in addition to that, consider that since last summer, the world has really changed as we know it. We used to look at employees as, your average American just trying to come to work to do a job. And what we discovered beginning last year is that as we take nothing more seriously than the safety and security of our passengers. And you think about what's been happening since last summer with ISIS and ISIL recruiting Americans. And I think the FBI is saying there are as many as 250 Americans now. They think that number could be higher, that they're following as people who are being recruited by these terrorist organizations. So America has changed because the threat is not only overseas, but now we have this vast insider threat. And then you have this big news program that told the whole world that, airport employees don't. So clearly, we had quite a dilemma. And I had to testify before Congress. And what I said to Congress was, by the end of this year, we will have all of our employees screened before they go onto the secure area. And listen, the point is very simple. I don't know how many of you have pre-check, but I bet many of you have pre-check. And what they did was they did a background check on you, whether it's through your frequent flyer program or the global traveler program or whatever. They did a very thorough background check on you, the same kind of background check they do on a 10-year background check. Once they've done that background check on you, they say you're eligible to have pre-check status. And what's the benefit of that? Well, you don't have to take off your shoes anymore. You can leave your laptop in your bag. You have to take off your coat, but you don't have to take off a jacket if you're wearing one. Well, the point is you didn't get a free pass. You still had to be screened. And most of you in the pre-check program are probably more mature, meaning you're probably 30, 35 and older. You probably make over $100,000 a year because most of you are frequent travelers. But you didn't get a free pass. You still had to be screened. They just made it more convenient for you. Now consider the population of employees at airports. Certainly we have pilots and flight attendants and people you would consider more mature, but a large percentage, probably more than 50% of our employees, are young people working in the concessions, the ramp, many of them making close to minimum wage, not the $100,000 you make. They tend to be, significant percentage of them are younger, not more mature. And so if we operate in a risk assessment environment and we're assessing the risk of these two groups, you insist, correctly so, that even with the pre-check program, pre-check candidates should still be screened, but you determine that it's adequate to only do random screening of employees. We don't think that is consistent. And so what we have done is that we have built facilities as fast as we could. And so effective September 1, all Delta employees, because we couldn't build fast enough to get one for everybody, all employees except Delta employees now go through security screening. just like you do. And by the end of this year, we will have all of the processes in place so that all of Delta's employees will also be screened. So I want to send a very strong message to all of you that we're taking this very seriously, and Hartsfield Jackson Atlanta International Airport considers your safety our priority. And so thank you very much, and I'll take your questions.
Thank you so much, Miguel. It sounds like you have a lot of good things both in the plans and ongoing at the airport. We have time for just a couple questions, and a couple have already come in. The state of Georgia is very fortunate to have two tremendous assets, one being Hartsfield Jackson International Airport, the other being the Port of Savannah. With the ongoing port expansion, how do you see the relationship between the port and the airport moving forward?
Well, Curtis and I talk from time to time, and we're looking to strengthen and build that relationship, not necessarily from the point of view of intermodality, because quite frankly, less than 1/10. I talked about why people would put air cargo on a plane, because it's very expensive. I talked about that, and so if you had a choice, you'd rather put that cargo on ocean cargo if it's coming internationally, and a lot of ocean cargo, of course, goes on rail. The freight that comes in, air cargo that comes into airport, the intermodality is almost 100% with surface transportation, trucks to be more specific. And so, of course, much of it is with what we call the integrators, such as UPS and DHL and FedEx. But less than 1/10% of freight that comes by air goes on a ship, or that comes by ship goes by air. So there's very little to no intermodality between the seaport and the airport. However, from a transportation infrastructure point of view, it's in our best interest to collaborate to determine if there are any synergies that we both can gain from. So I do have this who runs the seaport, and we've committed to it.
Thank you. I guess probably time for one more. The airport recently had its bond rating significantly upgraded. What does that mean for the future of the airport, and what does that allow you to do?
Well, at the end of the day, running an airport and a construction program, because the bonds are sold to finance the construction projects at the airport. And an airport is not unlike your own personal life. If you have a capital project at home, say you're going to build a new house, the first thing you're going to do is to try money from a relative, because what your goal is to have your lowest cost of financing that home construction. So some of us have the privilege of being able to talk to the rich uncle or the rich mom or dad, but if you don't have that choice, your next choice is to go to a financial institution. And that financial institution does a credit background check on you, runs your credit background, and they will determine what your interest rate will be, and you'll choose the financial institution that gives you the lowest interest rate. Well, of course, the rating by Standard & Poor's and Moody's and Fitch, that's your credit check when it comes to selling bonds for us. So when Moody's or Standard & Poor's or Fitch, when they rate your airport credit worthiness, the better that credit worthiness is, and if the higher the rating is, just like your credit score, the cheaper the interest rate that you're charged by the market. And so you literally save millions of dollars when your credit rating goes up, just as you. If your credit rating goes up, the bank charges you a lower interest rate, and so over the life of your mortgage, you save tens of thousands of dollars. So that's the direct relationship.
Thank you. And I guess finally, in closing, we have a tremendous airport. We want to continue to have a tremendous airport. What can the state and the citizens of Georgia do to help maintain that status?
The number one thing that the state can do, and we are working with Randy, we'd like the business community to be a part of it and get even more involved, is actually two things around the same subject matter. Air service development, that's the subject matter. I can't emphasize the significant economic impact adding a new flight especially to a fast-growing economy, represents. If we were to get a non-stop flight from Atlanta to Beijing tomorrow, within 6 months to 2 years, not only see a significant increase in the number of Chinese visitors staying at our hotels and our restaurants here in Atlanta and the state of Georgia, you would see a significant increase in the amount of foreign direct investment from China coming into the state of Georgia. And so we had a flight to Shanghai by Delta, which got relocated to New York. We as a community, in the entire state of Georgia, need to approach the Deltas of the world and other airlines as well, but especially Delta, because they can hub here at flight, and ask the question, what is it that we can do to earn your service? The flight moved to New York because it was more profitable to operate out of New York. But we need to have flights to Mumbai and Delhi, and Shanghai and Beijing. We need to have flights to all those fast-growing economies, because if we don't have those non-stop flights, it doesn't matter how many business missions the Metro Chamber of Commerce makes. Randy is just an extremely competent and successful economic development guy, but it doesn't matter how many trips the Georgia Economic Development Agency takes to China and India and those places. We will have minimal to no success if we do not have the non-stop flights to support that trade and development, whether it's tourism or trade of commodities. So the number one thing that we're trying to do, and I hope you can join us as a Chamber of Commerce, is when we go talk to airlines and we present to them our financial performers in terms of how many flights we think the routes can support or whatever, that you are there supporting us, encouraging us, and telling those airlines, Delta and others, how we can earn the service. They're not charitable organizations. They should go places where they make money. And that's the first. So getting the news, we need your support in cooperation, and we already have a strong partnership that we're even stronger with the Metro Chamber, Randy's Georgia Economic Development Agency, the Convention Visitors Bureau. We're already, we went to Turkey last a year and a half. Turkish Air started serving Atlanta this year, because we made a powerful statement. And once we get the service, though, and that's where it's key, in those presentations to get the service, we need private and the economic development agencies to work together, so that when we make the presentations, we say to these airlines, and should you fly to this route between Atlanta and Beijing, Atlanta and Delhi, or Atlanta and Mumbai, within the first 6 months to a year and every year after that, we will invite a delegation of chamber members from Turkey to Atlanta and take them throughout the state of Georgia, so that they can see the business opportunities here in the state of Georgia. And in return, we will take a group of Georgia business people and chambers of commerce to Turkey to meet your chamber counterparts in Turkey, so that we can build business and build business ties and ensure the continuity of the service. And on the tourism end, the same thing is true. The Convention and Visitors Bureaus of the various cities within the state of Georgia, whether it is Atlanta's Convention and Visitors Bureau, excuse me a moment, I'm sorry, or the Douglasville Chamber of Commerce. I met with mere persons in Douglasville recently. Once those flights begin, we should, together, led by the Convention Visitors Bureau, we team up with that particular airline, and in the case of Turkey, we fly to Istanbul a few months after the service begins to meet with their Convention Visitors Bureau counterparts over there and all the major travel agents in Turkey. And we put on a show for them, but the important thing is we will take all the travel agents from the state of Georgia, as many as we to Istanbul, to meet their counterparts over there, so that those Georgia travel agents can come back to Atlanta and the state of Georgia and better sell Istanbul, and invite the travel agent community that they've met there back to the state of Georgia, so that the travel agents in Turkey and Istanbul can better go back to Istanbul and Turkey and sell the Georgia destination to their people over there. In other words, the sales shouldn't stop once we get the service. And that's perhaps the reason we lost this flight to China by Delta, is once we got the service, I don't think we had a strong enough partnership to help build the traffic so that Delta could sustain it.
Miguel, thank you so much for your time and all the good work that you continue to do at the airport. Thanks to those who are able to join us today on this webinar. We have a number of upcoming events. You can find more information at gachamber.com. And thank everybody for their time today. This concludes our webinar.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Okay.